Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. I'm Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened, and this is the Thinking Horse and Rider, the podcast dedicated to training you to become the best possible partner for your horse. Here, we explore the science and soul of horsemanship. We dive into equine behavior, the psychology of partnership, and compassionate training methods that help you become a thinking rider who creates a thinking horse. Because when you understand how your horse's mind works and show up with empathy and presence, everything gets easier and a whole lot more fun. My goal is to keep riding easy and fun for everyone, while helping you deepen your connection, find more flow, and maybe even create your own unicorn along the way. Whether you're working on dressage movements or just trying to understand why your horse did that thing they did, we'll explore the research, the real talk, and the small shifts that make a big difference in and out of the saddle. So grab your boots, take a deep breath. What are you waiting for? Come ride with me. Hey horse fiends, welcome back to another episode of the Thinking Horse and Rider with me, your host Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened. Last week we did a little experiment about standing and regulating. I would love to know how those experiments went, so you can hit me up on social media or send me an email. The links are in the show notes. Could you stand and regulate? Like, could you personally stand and regulate without needing to micromanage your horse, without your mind wandering all over the place? Was your horse able to hold their own space? Or did they feel the need to come into you? Did they try to go away from you? And this really isn't about them being still, right? Like, we're not trying to train them to stand and be still. We're just trying to see if both of us can hold our own space, be autonomous, and have a regulating moment. Because sometimes you get into situations where your horse is nervous, you both might be nervous. And you need to take a minute just to get some distance, process the situation, and then go back to doing whatever you're doing. If you teach your horse to do this, that this is something they can do, that you can also do, that you allow them to do. You can also do this when you're riding, even though technically you're not separated, right? Because you're sitting on the horse, and the whole point is not getting separated from them. But if you teach this on the ground, and I love to teach it using my breath, just like in the transitions, and we just chill, stand there for a couple minutes. We're both aware of the surroundings. I'm not on my phone. I'm not talking to friends. I'm not doing anything else except sort of processing the scenario around me, and the horse is hopefully doing the same. It's a really important thing to learn how to relate to your horse in that way, and also for your horse to learn that they can relate to you in that way. And that's why one of the seeds in my Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart course is called Relational Consistency. Because we need to learn how to relate to our horses with consistency, just like we do people. Because horses are individuals. They think, they feel, they can learn all the things pretty much that humans can do. They don't have thumbs, right? And they don't walk upright. They're not biped. There's some differences for sure, but there are a lot more similarities than a lot of us were taught about when we were coming up riding, say, 30, 40 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. Did you notice when you were doing this little experiment that your horse mirrored your energy, or did you want to mirror your horse's energy? It's a really important thing to notice, may seem like a small exercise, like a trivial thing to do, but these small things often reveal the biggest truths about horses and about riders. Remember, it's not the stillness that matters. It's okay if the horse moves around or looks around. What is important is that they can occupy their space and you can occupy yours. Both of you can feel confident and safe in your own spaces without the need to be all up in each other's business. That goes for both of you. This really is the basic concept of self-carriage. And I don't think it matters what discipline you study. Of course, this is the one thing that we hear is like the epitome of everything in dressage, right? The self-carriage. Simply being able to stand on your own, be autonomous, and regulate yourself in your environment is self-carriage. Self-carriage is just as much mental as it is physical. And not only do we need to teach our horses how to do that, we need to be able to do it too. And I think you need it in any discipline, not just dressage. It's about being able to adapt and regulate in the simplest situations. And we really owe it to our horses to educate them and show them that this is possible. After all, we're the ones who have domesticated them, not the other way around. So this whole standing thing isn't passive, right? It's about balance, awareness, and communication in microform. A horse that can regulate in this way isn't just standing still or obeying. They're carrying themselves mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I hope this concept makes sense to you. Not just in your logic brain, but in your feeling brain or in your gut, right? Can you feel what I'm saying? Or are you just nodding along because it sounds good? We want our horses to be able to regulate and carry themselves mentally, emotionally, and physically. They are smart enough. They can have that responsibility. But what is often taught in our horse world is compliance. And then we humans mistake that for contentment. And they're not the same thing. And honestly, I don't really want a compliant horse. I want a well-educated, content horse. Because a compliant horse is only compliant until they're not. And on the other hand, a well-educated, content horse is able to think through things, is able to relate to me, follow my direction, understand me and what I need. Whereas a compliant horse is just trying to stay below the radar so nothing crazy happens. But if something crazy happens, all bets are off. Sort of like children, in the fact that if we teach children that they just must be compliant, right? They have to do A, B, C, D, and they don't have to think through how they do those things. When the situation changes, for instance, getting out the door to go to school, if they just know that they have to put their shoes on and get their backpack and go out the door, what happens when the shoes aren't where they're supposed to be? If you have an educated child that knows that they've probably taken them off in some strange place, they can then go look for their shoes. If you have a child that you've always taught that the shoes are going to be in X place and they're not there, the child's likely to have a meltdown. So, while I don't recommend hiding your shoes from your children in the morning, this is a terrible idea. But teach them that they can find their own shoes, right? And the thing that often keeps us from doing this with horses, and even with our kids, because we don't want to have that meltdown, is fear. And the fear mindset is so strong in the horse world. It's usually the fear of what might happen, or the fear of what has happened to someone in the past. And it's really difficult for riders, horse owners, usually to overcome this fear because it's been drilled into us for years. But here's the thing. Shit happens. Shoes get misplaced, plastic bags get loose, whatever. So we need to be aware and be prepared, but not be in control, because we can't be in control of every situation all the time. And this is the biggest underlying fear, right? It's the fear of not having control. It's such a hard concept often for us to grab because we're often more afraid of the guilt and the shame we will feel if something bad happens than what the actual bad thing is, right? For instance, if I let go of my horse and he runs out into the road and gets hit by a car, my horse is going to be dead. I'm going to have to, pay for this person's car. I'm going to get sued. What if it hurts the human? And now I've hurt this horse that I'm supposed to be protecting. And yes, we do live, at least in the States, in a litigious world. But again, shit happens. We have insurance for a reason. The shame and the guilt are just things that we have, right? So here's the thing. Shit happens, and it always will. Just be aware. Be prepared. You can't control it. You cannot control everything. Again, things happen. We can educate ourselves. We can educate our horses. We can do our best, but we cannot control every situation. And we really have to get over the mind control of the shame and guilt because it's all fear-based thinking. And for me, I don't know if this is easier for me because I had the experience of growing up with a father who landed airplanes on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. That's kind of like a small moving target in the middle of a giant ocean. And found it fun and exhilarating to be catapulted off of the same ships in a jet. So I don't know if it's the experience of having lived with that or if it is the genetics, right, of having that as a parent. But either way, things happen. Things happen to pilots flying planes. Things happen with horses. Things happen when you're driving your car. Sometimes kids take off their shoes and forget where. Things happen all the time, and we cannot control them. But we can control our reaction to them when they happen. And we can teach our horses the same thing. We can teach them how to self-regulate and how not to be so reactive. And I really think this is a fundamental and basic skill that any living creature should have. But it's not something that you teach once and you forget about. It's like a very basic skill and you're building on it your whole life. Just like riding, right? Because you're never done with the basics. We hear the quotes all the time. That advanced work is nothing more than the basics done better. The concept of self-carriage, concept of autonomy, the concept of self-regulation, they're all the same. They're no different. I see a lot of riders who have a hard time imagining either how a simple exercise can become something more advanced or what simple steps of the advanced exercise might be. And I think it's because we are so taught about control and compliance, and we're not taught about thinking, educating, having building blocks. It's just control the horse, get them to do this, that, and the other thing. Instead of teaching them a basic skill, building on it, building on it, building on it, right? This is mostly a complete failure in coaching. It's not the students' faults, not the riders, the horse owners. It's the fault of trainers who don't show riders, new horse people, how to do this. And you also have the ones that are just going to encourage you to push through. Push through this hard part. It's okay if you don't get that because you can do the next thing. Eventually, that thing you can't do is going to come back and bite you. And then you're going to be stuck somewhere and not know how to get yourself moving forward again. Instead, oftentimes, the easier and more successful route is to break the problem down into its smaller pieces and make them better before we put those pieces back together. Just like the standing and the regulating. Many times, our domestic horses don't even know that they can stand at arm's distance by themselves because we always keep them here. That's a failure on our part, not on the horse's part. So if you notice that your horse always wanted to be right here, how do you show them they can be out there and be on their own? It's a simple thing, but it's an important thing. And a more advanced undersaddle example, and a problem that I get all the time from riders, is the canter. So many issues with the canter. They either don't get prompt transitions, something happens during or after the transition that they don't like, bucking, head tossing, crow hopping, rushing, combination of those things. What you will hear mostly in the arena is keep kicking, pull their head up, keep going, don't let them stop. Make the horse canter and make them go forward. This approach can work for a very secure, confident rider who has a good feel, but it is a disaster waiting to happen for most people. And it makes me cringe every time I hear it. It's one of my pet peeves. So now you're like, well, what do we do instead? Because that's what we've always been taught. Exactly. What I want you to do is play around. Find out where your hang-ups might be. Is it that as a rider, you're not balanced or you're afraid? So when you go into the canter, you lose your balance and then you become fearful? Or are you just afraid of the extra energy, the extra power that the canter holds? And that's too much. Because most of the times these canter issues really aren't horse problems, right? Horses canter all the time. They actually do that more than they trot. A lot of times out in the field. So we can usually help the horse and the rider find an easier way. Another common thing is that riders just have a hard time getting the horse to go promptly, right? They're secure, they're confident, but they say their horse is lazy. Well, they're probably not lazy. They're probably just desensitized to the aids. So we can refine the halt to walk, the walk to trot transitions, even halt to trot transitions. Create a more freely forward and engaged horse. And then we can try the canter again. If the problem is that the horse loses their balance, There are exercises that you can do to create more coordination and allow your horse to feel more secure. Generally, if there's bucking, rushing, head tossing, it's a balance issue. Something is not working well for the horse, and they're just expressing that. The rider's unbalanced, well, then you've got to work on that rider's balance and their own core strength and maybe their mental strength. And what can we do to help them improve that mental strength or their balance before we ask them to canter? So many riders are overfaced in the name of progress. And it's not fair. It's not fair to the riders. It's not fair to the horse. Doesn't mean that you're making progress slower. Just means that you're doing it better if you don't rush yourself into something where you feel unbalanced. Sometimes there's the legit fear factor. Either something bad has happened in the past or the rider just doesn't feel comfortable. You can actually pretend to canter in many ways and help the rider and even the horse work through that without the pushing, kicking, pulling the head up, using the stick, scaring the crap out of everybody. And one of my students, Karen, is a perfect example of this. I got a video of her a couple weeks ago cantering her horse on a long rein, saying, "Oh my gosh, isn't this lovely?" And then she also does a lovely trot transition. And then just yesterday, she told me that she could absolutely die today because she had met all of her goals. Because when I met her, she said, "I don't canter. I'm not going to canter. I can't canter." And yesterday she also said now that she loves to canter because it's fun. And it is fun. It's fun now. It wasn't fun for her before. It wasn't fun for her horse either. I did not ever tell her to kick, keep going, pull the horse's head up, or make her canter. In fact, one day the horse just offered to canter, and I made her trot right away. And I wouldn't let her canter. Not that she really wanted to canter, but I didn't encourage it. And then when I felt like she was more comfortable, if the horse would offer the canter, I would just tell her to follow along and to trot as soon as she felt insecure. It was amazing how quickly they learned to canter on a long rein, also in a bitless bridle. So from someone who was always afraid of her horse running off, this is a huge, huge thing. And all we really did was deepen the simplicity. We didn't make anything harder. We made everything easier. You may be thinking, well, I want to compete and I want to do competition, and competitions are harder and everything is more advanced, right? We have to know these hard things. But if we take dressage as an example, from the intro tests through FEI, but certainly if we just take the USDF tests from intro to fourth level, everything is a building block for something in the next test. If you think about the canter again, well, you don't canter until intro test C. Yes, but in test A, the pattern is much the same as it is in test C. The only thing that you do in test C is you add canter into your circles for just a few steps, and then you come right back to the trot and you resume the trot pattern. So test A is preparing you for test C. And parts of test B are also preparing you. It's just a little bit different of a pattern test. And of course, this morphs into longer stretches of canter and more circles and turns in training level. Your canter transitions change places. And then as you work up to first level, you're now changing your lead through the trot. The flying lead change in its basic form is a transition. These tests have also been testing your canter trot, trot canter from the beginning, right? The trot simple change is simply upping the ante on that. It's testing. Does your horse stay soft through your transitions? Are they responsive to the down and the up? Are they aligned or balanced? Or do they need to throw their weight from one way to the other or bend their neck from one side to the other? In second level, you begin the canter walk and the walk canter. You get the counter canter, which also is preparing you for your changes. And of course, they did that a little bit in first level where you had the shallow loops. Shallow loops prepare you for the actual counter canter. Second level is also going to add collection, which you need for wonderful flying changes, at least in the dressage world. And you do need a degree of self-carriage, though, for flying changes to be done well in any discipline. You get the turn on the haunches in second level, which is basically being able to move the shoulders around. You add collection and you add moving the shoulders around. You get flying lead changes, right? So we are building all of these skills, and then we start doing simple changes from the walk. So we're going canter, walk, canter. Very basis of the flying change. We add the turn of the haunches, which is moving the shoulders. And so when I'm teaching or preparing a horse to maybe do flying changes in the future at home, what I might do is canter, walk, one step of turn on the haunches in the new direction canter in the new lead, right? All of these things build on the next thing. And I hear a lot of people talking about, oh, I don't want to teach my horse the counter canter because it'll mess up the flying changes. Or we can't do counter canter after we've learned flying changes. The counter canter is actually prepping you for the straightness and the self-carriage, the alignment that the horses need to do wonderfully straight and correct flying changes. So the counter canter is always there. It's always a thing. And if you find that at any point something isn't working in your canter work, then you're missing a basic element. You know, maybe your horse isn't responsive. So they have no idea that you're adding a cue for the lead change. Why are they not responsive? Sometimes now you're using too many aids because you haven't taught them a degree of autonomy and self-carriage at the more basic levels. Sometimes you're going around trying to save your life at the counter canter and hold everything together. And in that, you can throw your horse onto the new lead, maybe, but it's probably not going to be a clean change. But if you add a cue, you ask for the canter, they're probably not going to even know what you're doing because they're trying to save their life too. So go back, fix the things at the beginning. Break the things down. Use your imagination. Think about what you're asking your horse to do and what the very basic steps to that are, because they're there. And if you're not sure, ask a friend, ask your trainer. They should know. If they don't, that might be a red flag. So you want to just go back and find these missing pieces and then keep upping the ante, right? Because, of course, when you get to third level, you're going to have flying lead changes. You're also going to have half pass. You're going to be making shorter turns at the canter. And then, of course, when you get to fourth level, you're going to be doing canter turn on the haunches or canter pirouettes, partial pirouettes, right? And then that just builds. And also builds up into the tempi changes. More than one lead change in a row. But basically, if your walk turns on the haunches, your walk pirouettes aren't good, your canter ones aren't going to be good either. Think of it like math, right? Addition never goes away, even when you're doing calculus. And dressage is really a math game. Maybe that's a whole nother podcast episode. But just look at the movements. It's all about a math score. And what movements are the coefficients of 2? They're your most important movements and also the ones that are building into something else. And if you get better scores on your coefficient of 2s, you are more likely to win a class than if you get terrible scores on your coefficient of 2s and better scores everywhere else. It's a math game. Often riders settle for good enough. We want to move on to the next thing. We want to do the next thing, and we need to keep doing the next thing. We need to keep making progress. We need to keep upping the ante. We need to keep ourselves engaged. We need to keep our horses engaged. But what happens is that it's good enough, and we start to ask for the next thing. And then we forget about the refinement and the subtlety that we need. And so we've upped the ante, we've gotten to this next thing, and then we feel like we've hit a roadblock. I can't get this better. What is happening? Break it down, because it's probably something else where you're missing the refinement. You have a broken piece. Not a broken horse. You're not a broken rider. You have a broken piece. Having more refined aids, getting to a place where you're perceiving more subtlety, is giving you access to more precision than you had before. But if you're just charging ahead, trying to muscle your way up through the levels, through the movements, around the course, you're missing out on the subtlety and precision that are actually going to take you further. Hindquarter yield is another good example. At first, it's just a way to move the hind end, create understanding, maybe create a stop really quickly. But later, you can morph that into strength and control and teach your piaffe from it. You can also say the same for the halt at X. Halt at X from the trot, trot off. Also another way to work your piaffe, another way to train it. So if you have to haul on your horse to get them to stop, or you really have to kick them to go, or both, the piaffe is not going to be there. It's not going to be accessible. And you might say, well, I don't want to do piaffe. I just want to, do a third level test. Okay, well, you have to collect in third level, so that's essentially another trot, halt, trot transition, just to a lesser degree than the piaffe. And when you feel like you get to a roadblock like that, where you need to reassemble, where you need to refine, you need to make things better, you need to become more precise, we need to stop labeling these as backslides, because they're not. It's just part of the dance. You go a little bit forward and you come a little bit back. And you go a little bit forward and you come a little bit back. It's all about a yo-yo. Back and forth, back and forth. And when you start to look at it like that, you can also start to understand the training pyramid or the scale of training. And that it's not just climbing a ladder, just getting to the top of the pyramid. It's actually working on the things at the bottom of the pyramid the most, the things at the top the least. I've written a blog about that too, by the way, for those of you that like to read. But I will get off my soapbox for now about the basics. Well, mostly. because I also believe that we need to learn relationship basics to have the best partnership with our horses. If the basics in movement build self-carriage in the horse's body, the basics in relationship build self-carriage in the mind. If consistent training and progression build strength in the movements, then relationship consistency builds and forms your partnership. So in my course, Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart, we explore how this consistency isn't about control. It's not about compliance. It's about reliability, mutual understanding, and mutual autonomy. If you always relate to your horse in a way that's all about work and getting to the next goal, they're going to relate to you in the same way. If you relate to them in a way that says, I need your help to make this work and for us to have a great partnership, they'll respond to that in kind. The other thing is that being consistent is less about your training or fitness program than you think it is. And then that might be very important depending on what you're doing with your horse and at what level. But many riders forget about the relationship part, right? And the actual showing up emotionally for your horse and letting them show up as themselves too. And then this is where I'm really going to blow your mind, because I'm going to tell you that you also need to be inconsistent. We're often taught that horses learn from predictability. And while there's truth in that, they do learn patterns and schedules. This type of learning does not make your horse an active partner. It doesn't encourage self-carriage. It encourages monotony and boredom. And while we need to have some consistency in the way we show up for our horses, in what they can expect from us, and yes, our training and fitness programs may also need to have a degree of consistency for their physical well-being. But I'm talking mental well-being here. For mental well-being, we need to be consistent in the way that we relate to our horse. But, and this may be a bit of an unpopular opinion, horses need inconsistency too, right? They need fun, they need excitement, they need something different. And that's going to be different for every horse, because just like humans, horses are individuals. So you have to use your relational consistency to learn about your horse, to know what they like, what they want, what keeps them engaged. And it seems like a bit of a contradiction. I get it. And leaving the rigid patterns behind that many of us have been taught can be really hard. But it's one of the things I help you do in the course. You can show up and be consistent, but you can also be predictably unpredictable without being scary. Trust me, it'll change the way you relate to your horse. And for sure, it's a lot more fun. So this week's 10-minute or less experiment is that I want you to notice something that you do habitually, the same way, pretty much all the time, every day. One of the things that I can tell you I got into is while I untack a horse, particularly if they wear boots, I would undo the girth on the left side, left front boot, left hind boot, right hind boot, right front boot, put those down, undo the girth on the right side, take the saddle. I don't know why. That was just the pattern that my brain came up with. And I noticed that I was doing this. So now, even though I still like this pattern, I will purposely make myself change it up. And it's really interesting because at first you feel really weird and you're sort of uncoordinated. But you have to train your brain to live in that bit of icky, uncoordinated not feeling great, because sometimes you're going to have those moments on your horse when you're riding. And so when you train your brain on the ground to deal with them, you can deal with them much easier when you're in the saddle. The other thing is that when you're going about your business in a pattern like that, you're not doing it intentionally. You're not really aware of things that might be going on. You're just in the doldrum of doing it. So switching it up keeps you more aware. And we need to be more aware of the important things and not so aware of the things that we tend to dwell on that aren't healthy or that we're thinking about that don't relate to our horses at all. So figure out what habit you have. Pick something and get curious about it. How can you change it up? Don't wonder, why do you do this? Like, that's not the point of it. For me, can I take the right boot off first? Can I take the whole saddle off? Can I unsaddle from the left and the right? Just be curious about how you can change your pattern. Does it feel weird, icky, difficult? Do you want to just go back to what you were doing? Do you notice that you suddenly revert back to your pattern without even noticing it? It's really pretty freaky. If you're not brave enough to try this around your horse, or you just don't seem to be able to flesh out a pattern, that might be something else we need to talk about. But that's for another episode. If you can't come up with anything around your horse, try brushing your teeth with the wrong hand. Can you? It's gonna feel weird. Do you switch back in the middle without even noticing? And you start to notice when you switch back. It's a really interesting process. And I know it seems trivial, it seems sort of meaningless, but it's one of those small things that can lead to big things. So have fun playing with this, and as always, happy riding! Thanks for riding along with me today, friends. Remember, we spent last season letting go of perfectionism, and that work continues. Progress over perfection always. If you want to see the concepts in action, I've got riding episodes over on YouTube and online courses that take you deeper, including Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. All the links are in the show notes. Until next time, keep it easy, keep it fun, and keep showing up for your horse.